NASCAR Cup Series race. Here are your hosts, Kevin Bedstone, NASCAR Sky, and Jeff Davis.
Welcome back, race fans. We had a very exciting week at COTA. We have a great weekend of racing back at Phoenix now that we're evening back out after our super speedways and road courses. But yeah, I have to ask, since we're getting back into it, Kevin, who mashed the gas hardest?
Sky, we got to give it up to the back-to-back winner, Joe Gibbs Racing. Toyota started 19th on the grid, led 8 laps, and of course brought home that win. Christopher Bell getting it done. Jeff, your thoughts?
Man, Christopher Bell is on a roll right now, and we have to watch out for him because we know who won the race in the springtime in Phoenix last year. That would be the number 20 of Christopher Bell. So I think he did a solid job. I think it was a great day of racing overall. I mean, this is the first time I think I've heard all the top 5 drivers finish say, man, this was really clean racing. No one ran into each other. No one was trying to take each other out. Super solid, respectful, and that's the way racing needs to be done. So it was cool, even though Kyle Busch gave a nod out to it. So, and Kyle's getting better. He's getting up there. He had a good chance to win. I was kind of rooting for him a little bit there. But yeah, I thought it was really cool that all the drivers were just saying, hey, that was a solid finish.
Great race all around. I think COTA definitely exceeded my expectations. I like the reconfiguration. I really like, what they did for the fan experience there. It was windy. It was obviously warm. We'll get into BK and overheating here in a little bit. But, you mentioned Kyle Busch. Led 42 laps, almost got it done. He's now going to be on a 60-race winless, not something that he's excited about. But, the Joe Gibbs Toyotas just weren't on my radar going into this weekend. I mean, we saw qualifying. Denny Hamlin, of course, was the best of the bunch. The 23XI Toyotas were dominating. So when I saw Seabell coming off the grid 19th, I didn't have him on my radar, but man, he got it done. And not only that, he had to go against the road course ringers. We had AJ Allmendinger, SVG up there leading laps. So for Seabell to go out there, win on a super speedway, come and bring it down to a road course, and now we're headed to a track that he's familiar with, Phoenix, the, oh, by the way, 1-mile racetrack. Like he said, I love super speedways. Now he loves road courses. He is showing that he's so, he can run great on any racetrack that we go to early on. Is Joe Gibbs Racing the early favorite? It's hard to say. We were talking about the Fords and the Chevys last week. Are the Toyotas starting to flex some muscle, Sky?
I definitely feel like they are. I mean, they have a really good bunch of drivers driving for them with Joe Gibbs and 23XI. I definitely feel like it's going to be a toss-up next weekend here in Phoenix to see who will win. But Christopher Bell, I mean, he's phenomenal. He's so slept on, and it is very confusing as a fan base as to why we sleep on him, because he has proven time and time again that, he's very skilled. And I got to give him a huge shout out when he was turning in the corner and he overshot it so that he didn't take Busch out. I thought that was really awesome. I know a lot of them give a nod to that. I mean, that alone I thought was good enough for Mash the Gas, because I mean, instead of just cleaning someone out, just have the respect to do that. And yeah, I mean, I definitely thought going into COTA that the Chevys were going to dominate. I thought we were going to see, Connor Zillage up front, Shane Van Gisbergen, but they had some unlucky things happen there. But yeah, I definitely think Toyotas are here to stay, and gonna have to see what the Fords can do. I mean, they're gonna have to pick it up here. It's still, no win yet this year.
It's going to be interesting, as we head to a track where Penske is, very dominant. Of course, Joey Logano going to be defending champion, going back to the track where he got it done. But yeah, the Toyotas are coming out now. They're in the conversation, and I think we'll get a better, over these next 2 weeks as we get to Phoenix and then Las Vegas, as we've mentioned the past few weeks, we'll really start to get a grip on where these guys are at. Cream always seems to rise to the top. But my pick, Tyler Reddick, of course, I picked him to win the race last week. Went out and led 9 laps. 23XI showed some muscle. Bubba Wallace, of course, winning stage 1 there. Reddick out there contending, started from the pole. And I don't know if you guys saw that qualifying effort, but the way that they tandem that lap was incredible to put up the 1-2 fastest front row. I didn't think that was going to work. To me, it didn't look fast, but man, they dominated to take the front row, but just couldn't get it done at the end of the day. But still great finish, great points day. So all in all, I think COTA was a win for a lot of reasons. And I really do enjoy this new configuration. I think it's great for the fans. We did lose a passing zone, but I think 6A there created for some drama. Obviously, of course, we got to talk about Ross Chastain completely wiping out NASCAR's most popular driver there. What an incredible recovery by that 9-car Chase Elliott, Jeff.
Well, yeah, I was going to say the same thing. It was a really good track. I mean, I'm glad they took about a mile off of the surface itself. I think it made for much better racing, and it was way more action packed. But, like you were saying with Chase Elliott, NASCAR's favorite driver as far as popularity goes, look at it this way. He was involved in a wreck at Daytona, right? He was involved in a wreck last week in Atlanta. This week, totally wrecked out on the very first lap at COTA. But yet, right now, as far as point standings, he is fifth in the point standings list. So, no matter what adversity he is facing, Chase Elliott knows how his way to make it back up front, and he's doing a damn good job. And I thought the Chevys were going to do a lot better than they did, like Sky was mentioning a little bit ago. But I think we're going to see a lot more out of the Chevys once we get to Phoenix next week.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what they can do, especially with Hendrick. See if we can get Kyle Larson on a redemption tour after what happened with his tire there. But yeah, it was really good. I was happy to see the nine recover. I mean, it was unfortunate what happened, but if something's going to happen to you in a race, I think it's better to have it happen on lap one, to kind of gives you all day to recover from that. So I'm glad that Chase could recover, and I'm sure Chevy Camp wasn't too happy about that, with that going on with Ross Chastain. But yeah, I really loved COTA. I feel like on social media, the fans seem pretty split. A lot of them say it was boring and they didn't like it, but I think overall, I mean, there were so many different elements to watch. I thought, in my personal opinion, that it was just such a good race through and through.
I'd agree with you 100% there. And one of the things I thought was an interesting storyline along here, and I want to get y'all's opinion on this, was, between Austin Cindric and Ty Dillon. It was only the fourth lap of the race when Dillon pushed Cindric right off the track. Then Cindric, well, he caught up to him, leaned into the right rear's bumper, gave him a little bit of a spin there. Gave him that hook. What's NASCAR going to say about that? This is one of the rules that they were talking about as far as retaliation. I don't know. Nothing was like major consequences of the spin, but still, he did come back and he did retaliate. So is NASCAR going to come through and follow up with, hey, these are the rules. This is what we're doing. Or is it like, oh, we're just going to give him a pass? Like I said, it wasn't very severe, but what are you guys thinking?
Yeah, you beat me to it on that one, Jeff. The Austin Cindric deal there, instant retaliation. They made it very clear in the preseason that it's not going to be tolerated. It's going to be addressed. I don't know if we're going to see it tomorrow, usually on the Tuesday teardown when they start assessing penalties, but it was clearly a right rear hook. And that has been made blatantly obvious, especially on the ovals when you're coming off turn 4. If you right rear hook a guy, that's a very dangerous hit. This blow wasn't as bad, but that still shouldn't take away from the fact that retaliation is a no-go. What does NASCAR do here? I agree with you, Jeff. I think they need to put their foot down, call a penalty, because I don't want to see it happen later this year where it does get called, but they didn't call it here at COTA. We've talked about it with the cautions here a little bit. We need to see some consistency out of NASCAR. That's kind of my take on it, Sky.
I definitely agree. I want it to be consistent. I don't. We wanted to deter stuff like this, so it's really unfortunate to see someone like Cindric who needs to kind of get better to fall into that, especially with someone like Ty Dillon. That's not. I mean, no shade to Ty Dillon, but he's not very competitive week in and week out. So I felt like it was definitely one of those hot-headed moves that need to have a penalty brought down on it. I know that NASCAR is going to look at all they have and they're going to make a decision. We can just only hope, like you said, that it's going to be a penalty so that there's something that we can base off of for the rest of the year. Because I think after the rule that they made, this is going to be a good turning point, a good way to put the foot down and really show that they're serious about this new rule.
I think it was an interesting thing about both the Dillon brothers. I mean, what do you guys think about, the number 3, of Austin Dillon and the 11 car of Denny Hamlin? A little bit of a push off of the field there into the dirt there, and I don't know, it was a little bit of a payback from last year at Richmond, where old Dillon gave the 11 car and the 22 car Joey Logano when he split them right in half and wound up taking that win. Was this, we know as in NASCAR, these drivers never forget. They got, minds like elephants. So was this 11 giving him just a little bit of a payback? Nothing major, nothing I think a penalty would be, deserved. But I think Dillon, he was whining and complaining about it a little bit. And I think there was a little bit of payback in that one.
Yeah, I definitely feel, I'm not sure if I would say payback fully, but I'm sure it was on Denny's mind. He's thinking about it, and he's not going to go easy. He's not going to give, not going to give leeway to him. It's not someone that he would be like, all right, maybe you're a little faster than me. I'll get out of your way. I'm sure it was on Hamlin's mind a lot. But yeah, I think it was pretty ironic that Austin Dillon's going to get on social media and kind of cry about it when you also took out, you took out the same driver. I thought that was pretty interesting to see him get on social media and make us think about it. Cause I'm like, you did the same thing, buddy.
Yeah, like you said, they never forget. And was it hard racing? Was it a payback kind of move? It's hard to say, and that's the thing. It's such an in the moment split second decision. But for Austin Dillon to go on and whine about it, I think is predictable from what I've seen out of both the Dillon brothers. So, I mean, look, a lot of hard racing out there. I mean, 11 had a fender, tore off of it after the first lap. You mentioned Kyle Larson losing a tire. There was a lot of chaos in this race for sure. It was a lot of controlled and uncontrolled chaos at times. Unfortunate deal for Connor Zilisch, though, making his cup debut in that 87 car after a phenomenal performance in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, going out and getting his win there. He has shown that he's a dominant force on these road courses. No doubt in my mind that we're going to be talking about Connor Zilisch for many years to come. I think he's the guy that sponsors are keeping their eye on, and definitely probably the top developmental driver we have in the sport right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was just too bad to see it happen with Suarez. I know Suarez was a little pissed in the heat of the moment, when he's getting interviewed coming out of the care center there. But afterwards, he said, that was just racing. It wasn't really anybody's fault. This is one of those tracks where you do a lot of hard brake and there's going to be a lot of smoke coming out. I don't think it was intentional. But you know how these guys are at the heat of the moment. It's tough to call. Some of them will say, I got to wait to see the replay, see what actually happened. But it was too bad to see both those guys get taken out pretty dang early.
Yeah, it sucks so bad to see two of the same team go out together. I was really excited to see how Connor Zillage did. It was funny. He actually quoted a tweet on Twitter or X, a post on X, and it was talking about where some of the seven drivers in the Cup Series where they finished in their debut, and it's all like bottom, almost dead last. So he took that as a little motivation. He was like, it's not the end of the world. Maybe I didn't do good today, but apparently stats don't lie, and some of the greats didn't do good in theirs either. So I have a lot of faith in Connor. I agree. He's coming up. He's going to be probably, a face of one of these teams very soon, maybe even the face of the 99 ride.
That's a big call there for sure. I could see that though. I mean, definitely a developmental driver. That's what these guys want. They're starting them earlier and earlier. We talked about this a few weeks ago, Sky, about how Joey Logano was the youngest Cup winner ever. Is there a chance for him to challenge that this year if he's going to continue to make some Cup appearances as we get, into the Watkins Glens and the Sonomas a little bit later this year? That's going to be interesting to follow for sure. But a guy that doesn't have a great stats on the road course is Brad Keselowski. And, old RFK looking to turn it around. I mean, he did come home P15, guys, but man, after the race, they had to take him from pit road on a stretcher to the infield care center due to an overheating issue, something similar that we saw happen to Casey Kane at Las Vegas several years ago. He's okay. He's been treated. He's released, rehydrated, and whatnot. But when these fire suits fail, I mean, it was hot down there in Texas, Jeff, as you know, down in Austin, and it definitely got the best of BK. We've seen it. This is a very physically demanding racetrack. The G-force is going back and forth through the S's, the way that these guys are shifting. It puts a lot on the drivers, and I think that this really emphasizes the athleticism in motorsports, and BK was an example of what can happen.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what they were planning on doing, but they were saying, hey, after the end of stage two, when he got back out there, he's like, hey, my cool suit's failing, man. I got something. I'm hot. It's hot as hell out here. They said, we can bring you in. There's something we can do to take care of this. But then he would have lost so much track position. So really tough on him. That's so hard to do, run these races. We know it's hot. It's enduring, especially when you're down in Texas when it's super hot like that. And it was windy as could be. But something I kind of wanted to go back on what Sky mentioned a little bit about, Daniel Suarez and Connor. Daniel Suarez, he's this is a weird year for drivers coming up. We got a few guys that might be losing their rides. Suarez is having a rough time lately, and if he doesn't pick it up, we don't know if he's going to be back. Denny Hamlin, what are we going to see with him? There's some seats out there that are just kind of up in the air, and I think Daniel Suarez is one of them.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Denny Hamlin. Honestly, he's such an interesting case to me because it feels like he's not doing well, but really he's not bad. I mean, he has pretty decent stats, but I guess compared to what we know Denny can do and what we've seen Denny be able to do, I definitely feel like he is just falling flat for sure. I don't know if it's the lawsuit, over his head, or maybe it's, racing for two different teams. I don't know. I feel like Denny probably has one or two more years left. I can definitely feel the shift at JGR. Definitely can feel like Christopher Bell is kind of the new face. Probably Ty Gibbs would be who they want as runner up, but it'll be interesting for sure to see how long Denny stays in that 11 ride.
Yeah, and you're kind of right there. It's like it's tough. He's got a lot on his mind. He said, like between the lawsuits, running his own team, right now, I guess let's see here. He is 17th in the point standings currently after 3 races. He's just got so much going on. It's got to be weighing on him, and I think that has a lot to do with his performance and what's been going on. Because, like you said, we know how Denny runs. He's a great driver. He's one of the top-notch guys. He's taking over kind of the bad boy of the sport, so to speak, taking that away from Kyle Busch, which is interesting because Kyle Busch, he's gotten a little bit better. He doesn't whine as much. I was kind of surprised to hear the comments he made after the race, this weekend, giving props to everyone running clean and just running solid. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Denny Hamlin and Joe Gibbs. Will he end his career there, or does he go run full time or even just a partial schedule over at 23XI?
Well, that's good news for Denny, right? Is he has the option to do that. I mean, 23XI continues to grow in their, 4.5 year existence, and they're, championship contenders. These guys continue to build. They have great sponsorship partners. We've talked about FedEx, of course, pulling out over at JGR, leaving Denny with Sport Clips and a couple other odd ends. That's going to be a big deal. I mean, we look back to when Kyle Busch got the boot from JGR, when M&M's and Mars pulled out of the sport. We didn't know where Kyle Busch would end up. And I think that was the most humbling piece of his entire career, getting picked up by Richard Childress Racing. I mean, I wanted to see him get the win. I think Kyle Busch has come a long way, in the sport. He's matured a lot, still gets fired up. We heard his comments last week over Carson Hocevar, which I think were deserved. But look, Kyle, he ran a good race. I still tip my hat to him. He burned the tires off that thing. He knew that he just flat out kind of got beat by the guys in front of him and all around. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens with these rides. You talked about the 99 of Daniel Suarez. Is it a contract year? Is it a sponsorship issue? Are they just so quick now to say, hey, next man up, you're out? This sport is changing pretty quickly, and it's really, really moving towards the young guns. I mean, average age of these Cup Series drivers now yesterday was 31 years old. We've seen that continue to come down further and further every year that the Cup Series goes on.
Yeah, I definitely feel like the young guns are definitely the new move. And I think it's just a lot of that comes with money, and a lot of them have diehard sponsorships. And when we see some of the people that Monster sponsors, and how maybe they're not the most talented of the bunch, but they definitely get what they need to with that sponsorship money. And I think that's kind of where the sport is nowadays. Not to cycle back to the whole lawsuit and everything, but hopefully, the lawsuit can kind of change some of that, where you don't need to bring a bunch of money in just to guarantee a ride that, just your talent alone enough would be enough.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, these guys ride hard. They deserve to be in the sport. And I think NASCAR does need to share a piece of that pie a little bit more with these teams. I think the lawsuit's in order. I really do. And I think majority of the teams that did, most everyone did sign, the contract on it and said, we have to do it. We're in it. We're used to it. But, I give big props to Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan, and sticking it out there and just saying, hey, this isn't fair. And it isn't. I mean, you look at what NASCAR's done with all the different networks that they're on. That's bringing a lot of different money from a lot of different networks. And I know it's hurting us fans a little bit because not everyone has full on cable or every single streaming sport. If we want to see the qualifying and practices for these next few races in the last couple, if you don't have a Amazon Prime, you're not going to get to watch it. So, with the money that NASCAR's bringing in, I do think they need to share it out a little bit more. And so, I think Denny and, like I said, Michael Jordan are doing a damn good job of that, of sticking it out there and keeping it in the ring. Let's see what happens.
Well, they're kind of the voice of reason on this whole thing because NASCAR is getting a little carried away, getting a little greedy, with the charter deal. I'm glad that we're bringing some attention to it. It's been an ongoing thing since the end of last season. It's carrying over into this year, and I think there's going to be some good that comes out of it. Just keeping the focus on it front and center. I think Denny does a good job on his podcast, Actions Detrimental, of being, pretty blatantly honest about his positions on all of it and really kind of showing the nuts and bolts of what goes on as an owner, and as a competitor for another team. You really get a good look at that. And, Jeff, you mentioned the amount of stream services now that have gotten involved in this sport. I mean, starting next week, we're back to FS1. What does that do to our viewership? Leaving National Fox. IndyCar is now, signed a contract. Jamie Little pulling some of our NASCAR races over there. What does that look like? How much of a drop are we going to see? I haven't seen the ratings report yet from this weekend, but these stream services are definitely going to take a hit on viewership. And so how does NASCAR view that? I mean, we talk about how it's the commercial 500 anymore with the advertising dollars, so there's just a lot of things I think are in the unknown. I mean, we're going to run 5 Cup Series race on Amazon Prime exclusively for the first time ever. So a lot of things are changing rapidly, and it's, either get with it or get left behind.
Yeah, and again, I think it's unfortunate. They want to bring viewership in. They want to bring more people from different sports and have more people come in to watch races. But so you're trying in one way, but in another way, you're kind of cutting some people off. So I think NASCAR needs to find a balance to that because we want, obviously want our viewership to always grow. It's a great sport. We've got, like I said, a lot of young guns coming in, and I'm still waiting on, Chase Elliott. I know he's not a young gun anymore, but as far as the top all-time winners on road courses, he's in third place with 7 wins, but yet he still does not have one in this Gen 7 car. So I'm kind of pulling for Chase to get him into a win on one of these road courses. But again, like I was mentioning early, in fifth in standings, not too shabby, is it?
I think Chase Elliott's going to be just fine. I mean, does it look good that he's the only Hendrick Motorsports driver that has not won on a road course in the Gen 7 car? No. But, to get wiped out in the first lap of the race and then, have the comeback that he did, Alan Gustafson, everybody on that team, he's got a seasoned team around him, of course, with Jeff Gordon's leadership over there. HMS is always going to be in the conversation. I don't think Chase is in any position, that he's falling off or that Napa is going to consider pulling out, but who knows? It's just very unpredictable. But I think, as we get back to the road courses later this year at Sonoma, at Watkins Glen, of course, we're going to Mexico City for the first time ever. A lot of opportunities here to get a road course win. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago that we used to only run 2 road courses a year, and it's become more and more a part of this sport. And I'm all here for it. I think, we've had the stereotype of turning left for so long. I think it's good to sprinkle it in. I will say, though, Jeff, and I think you'll agree with me on this, I don't really want to see the road courses in the playoffs.
No, I don't either. I want to see him in the playoffs. I'm tired of even one single super speedway race in the playoffs. I love the short track racing. I love trading paint. I love the, mile and a half. I don't care if it's a cookie cutter, D-shaped oval, whatever you want to call it. That's where our meat and potatoes is, and that's where we see the best racing. Let's lower those spoilers down a little bit, just a little bit shorter, so that we're not getting as much drag, and we're going to see a lot more passing. And that's what's going to happen once we start getting to these regular courses. And, as far as what you're talking about, like with Napa, I don't see them getting away from Chase Elliott, not in any bit. I mean, he's such a damn good driver. And Hendrick Motorsports right now, and the top, let's see here, 7 positions in place. 3 of their drivers are in the top 7 as far as point standings right now. So I think Hendrick Motorsports is in a really good position. Obviously, William Byron's in first place right now, leading the entire field, but that things can change now that we're getting into the miles and the mile and a half. So I think we're gonna have a lot of really good racing here coming up these next few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just say this, Jeff, I don't think any sponsor is safe. I mean, we saw what happened with Lowe's and Hendrick Motorsports. 7-time champion Jimmy Johnson, Lowe's pulls out. FedEx, M&M's. I mean, we've seen these big sponsors just pull out for no reason. I mean, not even based on performance. So, as much as I'd like to say that, I know Napa's celebrating their 100-year anniversary and that's all well and good. I don't know if any sponsor's safe anymore. This sport is changing so rapidly that it's going to be interesting to see. It's not even performance based. It's just a money thing, and going back to my point about these advertising dollars, how much does that come into play as this season goes on? But yeah, I mean, you mentioned the 24 car, definitely leading the pace for Hendrick Motorsports now. We'll see what happens when we get here to Phoenix. I think we'll get a better look at it. We know that HMS runs pretty well there, but I think it's going to be a Penske-Hendrick battle.
I too think it's going to be a Penske Hendrick battle. I was thinking about who I thought is going to win, and it really comes down to just one driver off one of those teams. I think they're both really, really good here. I think the Toyotas have still a little bit of a way to catch up. I mean, we even seen that with Tyler Reddick in the Final Four last year. He just wasn't all there. So I definitely feel like it's going to be a Chevy, probably Team Hendrick this weekend. And what we were saying about sponsors, I mean, I kind of agree with Kevin. I don't think it comes down to how good someone is or how good a team is anymore. They don't make as much money as they used to, and it just almost doesn't work to do it anymore, if that makes sense.
It really does. It's tough these days. It does come down to business and dollars. There's a lot of money that gets spent for sponsorship in NASCAR. And so it's tough for some of these companies to have to pony up that much money. As we know, look at Chase Elliott and Hooters. He had a contract with them throughout the end of last year, and they had to cut him off halfway through because they just didn't have the money. And Kevin and I were talking about just last week, Hooters filed for bankruptcy. They're closing down all their stores. They're done. They're gone. And look at how much money they probably dumped into Chase Elliott and NASCAR. Did it really pay off for him? I don't know. I did get some of those free wings though. Every time that Chase Elliott would take first place, that was one of the deals they had, and I liked it. But I don't know if they got enough money out of it versus what they actually put into it.
It's hard to say, right? Because we saw that move with Hooters last year when they decided to pull out from Chase Elliott. Little did we know that they were going to file for Chapter 11. So there's just a lot of moving parts. Like you mentioned, it's all a business when it comes down to it. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of eyes on it, and there's a lot of competition to put these names on these race cars. I mean, the fact that DeWalt is still around and some of these longtime guys that have stuck around the sport, I think is great. But we've seen a lot of big names come and go. So. I think all these guys can do is just go out and run. I mean, look at, HendrickCars.com, primary sponsor. Rick Hendrick is fortunate to have that to be able to put on our NASCAR, a NASCAR Cup Series champions car for a sponsor. I mean, he can just pull that right out of his own pocket and put it right back in. So some guys are more fortunate than others. I think some of these underfunded teams are struggling with that a little bit. But that's just the way that the sport is designed now.
Yeah, you just brought up what I was going to say about the only one I think that's 100% lucky with sponsorship is that old number 5 with Mr. H being able to pony up that cash. He doesn't even really have to put anything into it other than a paint job. So, it's kind of cool for Kyle Larson to be able to have that. No, and speaking of Kyle Larson, he did get that extra point for having the fastest lap of the race, 99.244 seconds for a one lap around COTA.
The Xfinity fastest lap, 1 point. I like it. I think it's kind of a fun new rule that we have this year. Is 1 point really that important? Yes, it is. I mean, look how we come down to these cutoff races, every single year coming into the playoffs, and it's a matter of points. So I'm enjoying this Xfinity fastest lap point.
I agree. It adds another element. And yeah, I mean, maybe it is just 1 point, but look at how Kyle Larson's race ended up. I mean, that point, it definitely helps in the long run.
Yeah, and I remember Kevin and I talking about this quite a while back, when Tony Stewart and Carl Edwards, he came into the playoffs and he was going to win the entire series. And then when it came down to the championship, Tony Stewart got on a heater and won 6 of the races, and they actually tied in points. And the only reason that Tony Stewart got the championship is because he had won those 6 races during the playoffs. Now, if he would have had that one extra point, Carl Edwards would have had it. He would have actually won the championship, but the rules weren't like that back then, huh, Kevin?
Well, and that's just it, right? I mean, the sport continues to evolve, it changes, it figures out what's good, what's working, what isn't. We've seen rule changes almost every single year in the sport. I think we're heading the right direction. I like where we're at with making some changes. I think I've mentioned every single week this year that I'd like to see more drag taken out of these cars on the super speedways and others. But I think when we get our feet on the ground here in Phoenix, we'll get a good idea of where we're at. Back to the intermediate program. Obviously the flat 1 mile tracks, sister track to New Hampshire Motor Speedway. It's now we get down to what's what, and then we'll know even more when we get to Las Vegas and get to the mile and a halfs, right? Because the road course and the super speedways, they are what they are. We all know it's a little bit of roll the dice. We kind of know who's going to perform well on them, and the rest is just a crapshoot. But now we're going to see the consistency. We look back a year ago. We mentioned Christopher Bell winning this race. He's going to go for 3 in a row here on this season. Chris Buescher with RFK. He did finish 7th here at COTA, finished 2nd last year at Phoenix. What can RFK do? And of course, his boss, Brad Keselowski, came home with a top 5. So, I think the Fords are going to be strong in Phoenix for sure. I think Hendrick, we mentioned, is going to be good, but how much are these Toyotas going to get in there? And Sky, you had mentioned earlier that JGR is currently evolving. Look at Chase Briscoe, guys, still digging out of a huge hole. He's in the negatives on points from that penalty, still digging out of all these negative 28 points from 0. So, JGR has some work to do, and it could begin right here in Phoenix this week.
Well, a good thing for old Briscoe is he did get a top 10 finish. He finished P9. I'm sorry, that was P9 last year when when he won that. And like you mentioned, Christopher Buescher, I think he'll be another one to watch. I was looking at my wrong stat sheet there, but he does. Chase Briscoe does have. It's tough to dig out of a hole like that. So really unfortunate for him, but we'll see how he does. The Fords, I think, have got really, really good speed. Just the handling just isn't quite there yet. So I think they'll be working on that with their program, and we'll see what happens with that in Phoenix.
Old Joey Logano there, Sky, you should feel pretty good about going into Phoenix. I mean, coming off a championship, coming off winning there just a couple months ago in November, and just looking at Penske's single car speed, I think that these guys are in good shape. If I'm Ryan Blaney, if I'm Austin Cindric, or Joey Logano, I'm feeling good going to Phoenix to duel in the desert. I think these guys are going to compete with the Chevys for sure. And this is going to be a good look, I think, of where Hendrick stacks up now. We were kind of saying they were a little bit behind on some things, but I think going back to my point with Phoenix, I really do think it's going to be Team Penske versus Hendrick Motorsports this weekend. We'll see if old 23XI or JGR can get in the mix.
We definitely will have to see. Like I said, I agree with you 100%. I don't think Toyota's quite there yet at Phoenix. I would love to see if they could surprise me, especially someone like Chase Briscoe who needs to dig himself out of that hole. But it's better to have that happen in the beginning of the season than, closer to the playoffs when it's almost like a death sentence at that point. So I mean, if someone could do it, I have faith in Chase Briscoe, but I think, it's going to be probably a familiar face from the Hendrick or Penske camp probably this weekend for sure.
It's going to be a good race no matter what. I'm really looking forward to Phoenix. It's always been one of my favorite tracks to go to. And I don't know why so many people give it crap. I really don't. It's like one of those tracks that people either love it or they kind of hate it. I know a lot of people are sick of seeing the finale out there. I know we're doing it this year, maybe not next year. We're probably going back to Homestead. Maybe I'd kind of like it to see go somewhere maybe like a Vegas. Obviously
Right.
there's only a few tracks that we can run it. Kevin, you're going to be in Vegas here in a couple of weeks going to that race. So you'll have to give us an on the boots, shout out and see what's going on out there.
Yeah, my pops will be in Vegas in a couple weeks. I know he's excited about that. So, like I said, getting back to the meat and potatoes, we can kind of get an eye on what's going on. You mentioned, Jeff, that Phoenix isn't really popular. I think that's more for the championship, right? I mean, I think people are just ready to see the championship go away. Phoenix, I think, has a place for sure. I love the spring race. I'm okay with moving it back in the playoffs a little bit. I mentioned New Hampshire Motor Speedway earlier. I'm glad to see that get moved into the playoffs. I like these flat 1 mile racetracks. I think it does kind of play into some of the road course guys a little bit because there's a lot of braking involved. We see a lot of shifting now at Phoenix and New Hampshire. With this next gen car, it's kind of changed the way you got to drive these racetracks. So it should be a good weekend, I think, out there for the Shriners Children's 500 out in Phoenix. As we know, it's 312 laps. Good stuff. Fuel mileage is definitely going to be a thing. We see these long runs at Phoenix. Does it come down to a late race restart? Overtimes haven't been much of a conversation yet. I just looking at, Phoenix in the past, it really comes down to long run speed. Who can save their stuff, who cannot use up their tires. I mean, we saw Blaney give everything he had to try to beat Joey Logano in that championship. Great battle. And I think we're going to see something similar this weekend, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the racing in Phoenix, I think is great. Like you mentioned, with Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano just having at it last year. That was just so much fun to watch. Lone Byron coming in P3 and Larson in P4. And like I mentioned earlier, old Christopher Bell in P5. So, it was kind of a mix between the Toyotas and the Chevys and the Fords. But regardless, I do think that, I think Hendrick's going to really do a really good job, and Penske are going to be the teams that I'm going to be watching out for next weekend in Phoenix.
Exactly. I got my eyes on that 12 car. I think that's exactly who's going to make it to who's going to make the victory lane. I mean, he's been carrying Penske for a little while now, so I want to see him have a really good year, and I think it starts with winning here in Phoenix.
Yeah, you beat me to it, Sky. I was going to take Ryan Blaney for the win this weekend. Obviously, in fantasy now, we can kind of get back to now you got to start running them, right, Jeff? I mean, now you start running these guys. You're looking at the schedule a little bit. You want to put in guys that you're saving uses on now that we're through the super speedways and the road courses. Smoke them if you got them. Plenty of uses on these guys, and it all starts right here in Phoenix. Blaney definitely going to my lineup. Logano's going in there for sure. Of course, I always like to see how fast they are off the truck. Practice and qualifying is going to determine that a little bit, kind of see who's got that long run speed. But when I'm looking at those lap averages, I'm looking at practice. I want to see who's got the best 10 lap average. That's who's going to my lineup for Phoenix.
Well, before we turn the page on to Phoenix 100%, I think this is the first time all three of us are going to agree and actually have a trifecta. I'm going with the number 12 to win the race next week.
Damn, we're all unanimous on Blaney. All right, that's a first for Mash the Gas. We're all taking Ryan Blaney. And I think that's a great pick for sure. Jeff, you had mentioned that we have kind of a epic stat here coming in. First female driver stepping into the Cup Series since Danica Patrick.
Yeah, it's been 8 years, and I know I'm going to get hell for pronouncing her name wrong. But she's been in the Indy 500 4 separate times. And that's is it Catherine Legge, Legge? I can't pronounce her name. I don't know, but it's going to be interesting to see a lady out there running in the Cup Series since Danica, and she could be about 90% of these guys that she's racing against, she could be their mom. But shout out to her. So I hope she does well.
Yeah, I agree. I would like to see her do well as well. Danica kind of let me down there.
Yep.
I think we were all pulling for Danica at the time, and she just kind of fell off a little bit, and that's okay. A lot of great talent coming up. I'm rooting for Haley Deegan over on the rookie series on the IndyCar side. That's going to be fun to watch. I'm glad those guys are getting some good coverage. Keep up with the IndyCar as well. Great race down there in St. Petersburg this weekend. But I'll tell you what, guys, we are on to Phoenix. The Shriners Children's 500 coming up, FS1 this weekend. So we're over back to the stream side of it. The Xfinity Series there on Saturday. CW, of course. Trucks are still off. We'll see the trucks back in Vegas. So time to shut it down, guys. We are on to Phoenix. Appreciate everyone's support of Mash the Gas podcast. Be sure to follow us on all social media platforms at Mash the Gas. Be sure to follow Sky over there at NASCAR Sky across the board. And until then, guys,
Mash the gas.